Hi everyone, thank you for joining me in Loose Leash Walking Games. We're going to go over quite a few games today that will help your dog become much more engaged with you and learn how to walk with you through a space and not fling themselves out into oblivion and hope that you follow along. All right, so today we are going to talk about three different types of games. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the skill of loose leash walking. We're going to talk a little bit about engagement and what that means. And then we're going to talk a little bit about arousal and how that affects your leash walking and your dog's ability to function in the environment that they are currently in. So, does your dog actually understand how to walk on a leash? Do they understand what the meaning of leash pressure is? Do they understand how to move with you through the space without you just being an anchor at the end of the leash holding them back? Do they understand where the treats show up? Do they understand what happens when they do wander off to the end of their leash and what they should be doing instead? So these are all big questions that you need to kind of keep in mind when you are working with your dog and when you are walking them at any point that they are on a leash with you. Right? This seems kind of obvious, but one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that this is a skill. This is a learned behavior, just like sitting at the front door, just like teaching them how to lay down or go to their bed. So we need to make sure that we're consistent with our training, and we need to make sure that we are paying attention to what our dogs are communicating with us, just like we are communicating with our dogs. So pieces of leash walking, like I mentioned, does your dog understand how to move with you through a space? Do they understand that they should be next to you or slightly in front of you, slightly behind you, wherever you prefer them to be? Do they understand that leash pressure, so pulling on the leash when your arm is fully extended out and they are sort of digging into the sidewalk, dragging you towards the nearest mailbox? Do they understand that that is not the behavior that you're looking for when they are on a leash? Do you pay attention to their body language? Are they trying to tell you that the environment that you are in is too difficult for them and they have actually given up the brain space to that is dedicated to leash skills because they are so focused on the environment, what's going on, what's that trash can doing, where's that duck, who's coming out of the driveway. Those are all pieces of things that take away from the dog's mental capacity to remember how to walk on a leash with you. So that is one of those pieces that you really need to pay attention to help your dog stay successful. And then the last thing is leash walking is really, really boring for most dogs, right? The neighborhood never changes. It's the same people, it's the same stuff. Every now and then you might get a cat, you might get a kid at the bus stop. But walking next to you on a leash, whether it's in a heel position or sniffing the same mailboxes over and over again, is really, really boring for our dogs. And so for my dogs especially, I don't really walk them in the neighborhood. I try to walk them in places where they can really move, They can sniff stuff while I'm walking. They're usually on a longer leash. So if you have access to spaces where your dog can really get out and move, and you can put them on a longer leash so that they can sniff all of the things without dragging you, then I definitely recommend that you take advantage of that, especially while you're working through some of these games and some of these skills. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the skill of loose leash walking. Does your dog actually know how to move through the space with you? Do they know to come to your left hand side and that the cookies show up right off your waist at your left hand side? Or are you feeding them in front of you? So, a pro tip, if you're feeding them in front of you, they are going to hang out in front of you and you're going to end up kicking them as you're trying to move forward. So, if you just simply move your hand to your side and start to deliver those treats on your side, your dog will start to gravitate to that side, and start to hang out in that space a little bit more, creating a really nice loose leash where you want them next to you. Where do they get their treats? Where do they stand? So I just mentioned that. If you're feeding them in front of you, right, they're going to stand in front of you. If you're feeding them on your left, straight off your side, they're going to start hanging out on your left hand side, next to you and not stand in front of you. And that is due to that treat placement, right? They're smart. They're going to show up where the treats show up. So if your treats are showing up where you want your dog to be on your side, then that's where they're going to show up. And then the biggest one, what happens when they wander off? Do they hit the end of their leash and drag you to a mailbox and you just go with them? And then you remember, 10 feet down the street that you're supposed to be working on your loose leash walking, or are you engaged with your dog? And the second that they start putting some tension on the leash, you stand still like a tree and wait for them to check back in with you. That's the big piece to keep in mind. Like each section of sidewalk, each section of street is different for your dog. So if they know how to loose leash walk down the sidewalk to your driveway, then they also need to learn how to loose leash walk from your sidewalk down your driveway to the street sidewalk. Or, the section of sidewalk in front of your house is different than the section of sidewalk in front of your neighbor's house. So keep that in mind too as you're working with your loose leash walking, that you kind of need to practice in all of the locations before your dog realizes that loose leash walking is loose leash walking 100% of the time. All right, so let's go into our first game. So this one isn't really a game, it's more of a skill. So I'm gonna teach you a little bit about pocket hand. And so this is where you create a little pocket with your hand and your treat. So your treats end up in here in your pocket. And then when your dog is walking, you're actually feeding them on the outside of their face. So then when they're on your side, they're in a little pocket next to you, eating those treats. All right. So let's watch Toad go through this. All right. So you can see I've got my treat and I'm dropping it down right on the outside of his face so that he is eating that cookie on the outside of his face. And that creates that nice pocket. If I were to move forward, he thinks I dropped it. That creates that nice pocket. If I were to move forward, that he would stay right there between my hand and my leg in that nice heel position. There it goes. He figured it out. So there we go. Pulling him around to that side with the pocket hand. so that he starts to understand that the treats are going to show up on my left hand side and not necessarily in front of me. I did not have the best treats to do this. It was kibbles and they were very small. So it was hard for him to figure out what was going on. So you may need to use a little bit bigger treats the first couple times that you do this, so that your dog is successful. So you can see here that I'm creating that pocket with my walking, and it helps him put his head right there at my side. And this also helps me drive him a little bit. So you can see when I put my hand down in his face, it kind of helps with the keeping him in the position that I need him to be in, because I have a little bit more control over his face since he's got a cookie that he's trying to get out of that pocket right there. And this is Cargo. She's a little bit more experienced with this, so it's a little bit easier to see how I drive her in this position, just because she's been doing it a little bit longer. She also has a lot of history with rally heeling, which is that nice formal heel position. So you can see with that cookie in her face, I can drive her in any direction that I need to, because she is kind of sticking her face into that pocket to get the treat out of my hand. All right, so that is pocket hand. All right, so one of the things to keep in mind with your leash pressure is that the leash should be there as a seatbelt, not a steering wheel, right? Your dog should be mentally connected to you, and the leash is just there for safety purposes in case they decide to do something really dumb, like run out into traffic. And so keep that in mind. If you are using that leash to keep your dog with you, then maybe your environment is too difficult. Maybe your dog doesn't really understand the skills to loose leash walking, and you should back up and revisit those skills that we just talked about. So this is also a contract with my dog. If you don't pull, I won't pull. I find this a lot when I am working with clients, that they just get impatient and they want their dog not to pull them. But if their dog wants to stop and smell the roses for a second, the human side of the leash gets impatient and starts tugging on them to keep them moving. So I am fully aware that this walk that we are on is for both parties involved. It's for me to get out some exercise, and it's for my dog to go and move around and sniff the environment and also have a good time. So that is my contract with my dogs. If you're not pulling, I won't pull. So if you're not paying attention and you're yanking me forward, then I'm going to stop. But if you are paying attention and you're being respectful of that leash pressure, then I will do the same. If you want to stop and smell a telephone pole, then I will let you stop and smell a telephone pole until you're ready to move forward. It's not all one-sided. All right, so this is the next game. It's called Follow the Leader. I really like this game because it keeps things interesting for your dog and it keeps them guessing. So you can see Huds is nice and paying attention to me. And then I switch directions really fast and then feed him for catching up with me. He really likes this game. He really likes snacks. So I could change directions 800 times and he would be right there at my side, right? So it just helps you build value in teaching your dog to pay attention to you. And it gives you a way to break up the continuously moving forward on your walk, right? So it definitely helps when your dogs get excited about something. if they are used to you changing directions, then when you switch directions to get them out of a situation that they can't handle, then they have plenty of practice doing that. So this is a big one. Remember that tension on the leash creates frustration, fear, and uncertainty in your dog. So these skills are not only something that you need to be working on because it keeps you from tearing a rotator cuff or falling on your face because your dog's acting like Fruit Loop. It also helps your dog learn to be more confident in a space. So if they are excited about something and you choke up on that leash, then they're all automatically going to go, oh my gosh, what is going on? The human is upset. I need to be upset. And they're going to be more likely to react to something. So the next two games are to help you manage your dog's kind of environmental sensitivities. It helps you kind of get them redirected back to you and give them something that they can do instead of focus on whatever is in front of them.
Alright guys, this is a get it game, and this is a great one for engagement, and it's super, super easy because I literally just want my dog to chase cookies. Are you ready? Are you ready? Get it. Get it. Get it. So I'm waiting for him to turn back to me. Get it. And then I'm tossing the cookie in the other direction. Get it. Get it. Get it. Get it.
You can see that I'm using kind of a bowling ball motion, like I'm throwing a bowling ball down the lane, so that my dog knows which direction to chase that cookie. You can also see that I'm kind of using it not so much to throw ahead of me, but more to the side so that I can kind of move in a pattern in a direction that I need to move in while my dog is chasing cookies. So I'm moving back towards the camera, but I am tossing my cookies to the left and to the right so that I'm paying attention to leash pressure on my dog and also where they are in relation to my cookies. But we're still moving forward, right?
Alright guys, this is a get it game.
Our next game is our up and down game. And this one is also super easy. It's just as easy as chasing cookies. There's no cues with this one, but I'm just going to put a cookie on the floor and then I'm going to feed one to their face. And I'm going to put one on the floor and feed one to their face. And if I wanted to move in a direction, then I simply keep up that pattern of a food on the floor and then a food in their face as I move forward. So that my dog is eating the food on the floor and then catching up to me to get the food out of my hand. And we're gonna put a food on the floor and then a food to the face when he finds that cookie. This is really great because it's a pattern game. The dogs will learn to anticipate the pattern of the up and the down and the up and the down, and they end up activating their relaxation systems. It's just like us watching a lava lamp or those breathing apps where you breathe in while the circle gets bigger and you breathe out while the circle gets smaller. And it just helps them fall into that pattern and help them regulate their nervous system a little bit better. All right. So remember I said that walks for your dogs are really boring. Keep that in mind, that walks for your dogs are very, very boring. So these next two games kind of help us shake it up a little bit so that your dog is one, learning some skills that they need to work on while they're out and about. And also give them something else to do and engage with you in the environment so that they're not just trucking along waiting to get home. All right, so remember, we walk very slow. We are very boring and we walk very slow in comparison to them. If you've ever gone on a walk with Cargo and I, we are walking at Malinois speed, and that is not slow. Um, a lot of your dogs want to go and visit all of their friends when they're on walks. And sometimes that's not appropriate, right? They see another dog walking down the street, and they start to pull and jump and vocalize towards them. And that's not a behavior that we necessarily want to continue. So we stop that behavior so that, your dog is not a menace in the neighborhood. Like I said, stuff is always the same. It's the same dogs, it's the same people, it's the same mailboxes, and it just gets boring and redundant. The one pet peeve that I have with people that are walking their dogs is that they're on their phone. This is your time to bond with your dog and to actually work on some of the skills that you want to work on with your dog. Don't be on your phone. Don't answer emails. Take the 15 minutes. Nobody's going to die while you're gone for 15 minutes. If it's an emergency, that's one thing. But engage with your dog while you're out on your walks. This is their time with you, and they would rather be spending the time with you versus sniffing the same grass that they sniff every single day. So keep that in mind too. All right, the two games that we're going to talk about are Simon Says and our short recalls. So, our Simon Says game is just a place where you start to practice cues that your dogs know. And these should be cues that your dogs are 85% confident with inside of the house. And here we are taking them on the road, right? So periodically through my walks, I will stop at a random driveway and ask my dogs to do stuff. All of my dogs are trained to sit at the end of the sidewalks before we cross the street. There's a street at the park. The path goes through the entrance to the park, so it's really important that they learn, even when they're on their long leashes, to sit and wait at that apron of the sidewalk so that I make sure that they're not going to get hit by a car. They learn to sit and wait when people walk by, when bikes go by, when other dogs go by. And this is where I start to work on that, right? We start to just break it out in pieces while we're out on our walks when nothing is happening, so that I can build that consistency into the dog's understanding that they should be able to do all of these things in any environment, no matter what. So Cargo's very good at all of this stuff because she's been doing it for a long time. Toad is not as good because he was fat for a year. So some of these skills are harder for him. Also, he doesn't do the sports that Cargo does, so he doesn't have quite the repertoire that she has. But he does give us a nice look into what to do when things go wrong, right? Like we sometimes expect our dogs to know how to do things really well inside the house, and then immediately expect them to also know how to do those things outside of the house without the appropriate amount of practice in the environment that we are asking them to perform in, right? So here, Biggs has decided that he has forgotten how to downstay in my front yard. And this is a skill that we really work on. Like he is not good at staying. But you can see With Cargo, I am able to put her in a stay and walk around her. And he decided that he could not do that today. So here I'm working through keeping him successful in this environment so that we can work on waiting to be released, which is also another skill that we'll work on in another workshop. All right. So he just needed a little bit more help. His cookies are great. So I decreased my criteria quite a bit until I could build it back up to what he could do today. And then I was able to reinforce that heavily in this new environment and then carry on. And he's like, oh, that is hard. Good job, Big. All right. So now we're moving on to our short recalls. So this is another one, another game that you can play that helps build up the value of listening to your recall word no matter what, no matter where you are. So I teach a recall class that really, really emphasizes working up to the muscle memory of your dog coming back to you when called. Fairly confident that if I recall any of my dogs with their recall word, they will be halfway back to me before they realize that what they're even doing. And it's taken me a long time to build up to that point, and my dogs get reinforced heavily, heavily, heavily for all of that. But while you're out on your walks, you can throw that into what you're working on while you're walking. Your dog gets out ahead of you just a little bit, and you turn around and call them and run backwards a few steps. If they're like big and they're nice and engaged with you, you go ahead and toss a cookie forward and then call them and run backwards really quickly. And then feed them each time they do that. So what this does is it builds up the ability of your dog to understand that that recall word means to come back to you no matter where they are, what they're doing, what is happening. And so in my boring front yard, this is pretty easy for them, but I start to build it into, can I call you off of that mailbox? Can I call you off of that flower that you're really interested in? And I just use it as information. Can you call off of it? Can you not? Can I call you off of the dog clear on the other side of the block that's very tiny in the distance? And then it helps me build in a way that the dogs can be successful. Again, that's a workshop for another day. All right, guys. Remember that the key to your loose leash walking is in your relationship that you have with your dogs. So each time that you spend really engaging with your dog, doing fun things, giving your dog cookies and praise and teaching them that they're doing the right thing, is going to help with your overall experience of everything with your dogs. I find that when I'm on my walks with my dogs that I'm constantly kind of talking to them. I'm always giving them snacks. I'm always kind of doing the fun things that they enjoy doing because it's their walk. And I think we forget that sometimes, that sometimes we think that the walk is just the thing that we need to do to wear out the dog. So the box is checked and we're just trying to get through it. And remember that your dog only has you, and keep in mind that that walk may be really the only time that they get to spend one-on-one with you if you're really busy and doing things. So spend those 15-20 minutes with them, really engaging with them and really working with them, and it will make everything else that you work with your dog that much better. So, thanks for joining us, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope these were some helpful tips for you. And I look forward to seeing you in the